Lenovo XClarity Integrator for VMware vCenter allows administrators to easily manage hardware resources from their existing VMware vCenter console. Let's take a closer look. So here we have our standard vCenter console, and we can see the number of clusters that we have for management. So let's select one of these clusters, and from within the Configure tab, we're going to select the Lenovo XClarity Integrator. Now this first screen gives me an overview of my cluster, a little bit of update on capacity that's available, the health of the individual systems, and it also gives me a list of the systems with easy access. If I needed to directly log into the integrated management module, I could choose to launch into that console from here. Let's focus on some of the integrated functions that are available, and let's start with, I think, one of the most interesting ones, which is our rolling update. So what we're going to assume here is that we need to provide an update to some of the nodes in our cluster. So I'm going to create the update right here from within vCenter. I'm going to call it update 2, and I'm going to choose to update with policies that have previously been defined within my XClarity Administrator console. And we can see from this view, it lists the members of the cluster, and it indicates what policies are currently assigned. And we can see that most of the systems have current policies from January, whereas I have a couple of systems here that are a little back level. So I'm going to go ahead and select those systems, and for each of them now I'm going to change the policy assignment to my most recent one. And when I do that, you can see now it's going to go through a health check, and it's going to go through each of the different elements of the firmware, and it's going to identify what updates need to be made. So I'm just going to select each of these, we'll change the policy, and then we're going to move on. So we're going to update those two systems. If I was updating a number of systems, I could choose to have more than one system in maintenance mode at the same time, but we're just going to leave that one at a time. If I was doing a downgrade, I could force the downgrade here. Of course, I want to select that I'm going to perform VM evacuation. So the key feature here is as this update is being done, it's going to take each system, it's going to evacuate the workload first, essentially put it into maintenance mode, push the update down to that system. When that's complete, then it's going to move on to the next system. And I could also schedule this for a future time. Let's say I wanted to do it at 2 a.m. while my workload is a little lighter. We could easily do that from here, but in this case, I'm just going to let it run for now. It gives me then a summary of what we're going to do, and when I select save, it's going to go ahead and start that process. So we can see here in the status here, the task manager, I've got one that's finished. This one currently says not started, but let's just refresh here. We can see now that the process is beginning to run, and in a moment here, we'll see down in the bottom in the vCenter console, we'll see the vMotion starting as we go to the first system and move those workloads off and begin putting it into maintenance mode and preparing the process. There we can see the migration starting as the system goes into maintenance mode. And again, we'll kind of check back on this later, but it'll take a little while to get that firmware update done to each of these systems. All right, so in the meanwhile, let's look at some of these other functions here. Rolling reboot, I'm not really going to get into any detail on the rolling reboot because it's very similar to what we've just done, just without the update piece. So let's say I was making a firmware change to a number of systems or doing some other kind of update, and I just simply wanted to go through each system in turn, put it into maintenance mode, reboot it, go to the next system, etc. throughout the whole cluster. You could set up a rolling reboot process to do that. And then predictive failure, let's take a closer look at this one. This is really marrying up our ability to look at the hardware events that might be happening on an individual system and connect that to a virtual reaction. So for example here, if we look at one of the systems, I'm going to view the current policy that's applied for this system, and we can see that we've really checked all the boxes here. If anything bad were to start to happen on this system, perhaps it's predictive failure loss, perhaps it's a redundancy loss, we lose one of the redundant power supplies, the system's not going to stop, but it's no longer really protected, and so we might choose to go ahead and put it into maintenance mode before something else bad were to happen. So just to demonstrate that, since we do have that prepared on that system, we're going to simulate a predictive failure alert on one of the memory DIMMs. So this would be a situation where the memory DIMM and the hardware layer, it's going to always be checking and making sure that that we can see what's happening on the system. And if it happens to get to a point where it has too many unprotected errors, it's going to go ahead and put it into maintenance mode. And again, you can see that the maintenance mode is now entered for this particular system, and you can see down the bottom that it moved the workload off of that box. So those are both great examples of where integrating the hardware management within the vCenter capabilities really provides some tremendous opportunities for simplifying the management of our environment. So those are features that are available at the cluster level. Let's look at an individual server here as well. And once again, we're going to go to the Configure tab, and we're going to scroll down here a little bit, and we're going to launch into the XClarity Integrator functionality. And so here we've got some additional information on this individual server, a little bit of the system overview, so things like serial number, operating system, a little bit of hardware inventory information, so if I want to get more detail about things like the memory DIMMs perhaps, or the processor specifications, the RAID card that's contained inside the system. And in this case, because it happens to be a blade within one of our Flex chassis, we also have the ability to see the actual view, the map view of what that chassis physically looks like. So we can see in this example, we've got the node that we're working on highlighted here, but we can also see here that I've got a power supply problem in the chassis. That information is now also available from here within my vCenter console. If I decide I want to get even more detail from what I currently have here, it also gives me a nice hot link to be able to go back and go directly to the detailed view for that particular server here within the XClarity Administrator console. So it gives me an intelligent hot link back to my XClarity tool to allow me to further explore any other information that I might need for that particular system. And of course, I can also get some direct actions from here as well. If I wanted to simply launch into the remote console on the machine, I could do that from here very easily also. A couple other tabs here to talk about. One is the alerts and events. So I don't have any current alerts on this particular system, but if I looked at the event log, for example, again, information that's being gathered by XClarity is being shared with vCenter. I can see that. Firmware updates tabs. We kind of already talked about firmware updates at the cluster level. I can do the same thing if I just wanted to update a single server. Got some power and cooling information, but the configuration tab is the one I wanted to highlight here briefly as well. Within our XClarity Administrator, we have the concept of configuration patterns, which essentially allows me to change the personality, the hardware settings on an individual system. Again, those patterns are created and managed from within my XClarity Administrator, but here within the vCenter environment, I can choose to change and update those patterns very easily. So if I needed to redeploy a system and I needed to change its configuration, I could easily select a new pattern in here and deploy that here from within vCenter. So those are just a few examples and some of the features which we provide to really provide that additional hardware manageability from within the XClarity Integrator, all driven at really reducing the amount of overhead and the time that it takes to manage your hardware infrastructure by seamlessly integrating into the existing consoles that we know many of our administrators are already using.